Route of the Exodus Part 2 by G.M. Matheny. This will cover the next 12 encampments after the sea crossing, including Mount Sinai, according to the biblical list in Numbers 33:1-19. These are G.M. Matheny's Quest series and can be read for free at helpyoufaith.net. For more insight into the route of the Exodus, please avail yourself of these. During the documentary, additional information will be listed, but to keep from being slowed down, some will not be covered, but it is given so that those who wish may stop the documentary, view the information or references, and then please continue. As brought out in the Route of the Exodus, Part 1, the ancient Egyptians referred to their land as Ta-Mehu, meaning the land of papyrus, and when flooded, it would be natural to call it the Lake of Papyrus, Yam Suf. And they departed from before Pi-hahiroth, and passed through the midst of the sea into the wilderness, and went 3 days' journey in the wilderness of Etham, and pitched in Marah.
Keep moving. We must reach the mountain.
Stay together, children.
Drive the flocks forward.
After crossing the sea, flooded Nile, the children of Israel entered the wilderness of Shur, Exodus 15:22, and the wilderness of Etham, Numbers 33:8. It appears that one wilderness was encompassed by the other. Etham means boundary of the sea, and this is why the name Etham is found on both sides of the sea. For Israel to arrive at Mount Sinai, they will have to go south, and the only possible way for such a multitude as Israel was to take the large valley that was just south of Old Cairo. And during this flood, it would not have been possible for Israel to go due south, as the Torah mountain would have blocked her path. Marah Station, number 5. Marah means bitter. Strong's H4785. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Marah. The Bible said it was a 3-day journey from where they crossed the sea to Marah, and it is about 45 miles to the location on the map, which is a reasonable distance for the multitude of Israel in 3 days. Israel traveled through this valley till they came to the Fontaine de Camas Abondante, or the abundant fountain of Camas. The French name it a fontaine, fountain, but on older maps, fountain, spring, and well are used interchangeably. Because of what follows, the 12 wells of Eliam, which have been found, it was plain that Marah would have to be somewhere in this area of this fountain. No well or fountain called bitter could be found anywhere around there, but then it does not need to be named bitter or Marah, for the waters were healed by Moses. It's not bitter anymore, similar to when Elisha healed the spring of Jericho, and it remained good water. It is easy to imagine that Marah would be a large body of water, but the Bible only gives us the name of this encampment. It is Josephus who fills in the details. Josephus, they had indeed carried water with them, but when that was spent, they were obliged to draw water out of wells. And as they thus traveled, they came late in the evening to a place called Marah, which had that name from the badness of its water, for Mar denotes bitterness. Now here was a well, which made them choose to stay in the place, which, although it were not sufficient to satisfy so great an army, did yet afford them some comfort, as found in such desert places. Antiquities, Book 3, Chapter 1, 1.
The water is bitter! We cannot drink it!
Elim Station number 6, and they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water, and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. Exodus 15:27. Meaning of name, Strong's H362, Elim equals palms. After 3.5 millennia since the time of Moses, no one is claiming there would still be exactly 70 palm trees, and no proposed site for Elim has this number. Josephus said, "And now, removing from thence, they came to Elim, which place looked well at a distance, for there was a grove of palm trees. But when they came near to it, it appeared to be a bad place, for the palm trees were no more than 70, and they were ill-grown and creeping trees by the want of water, for the country about was all parched, and no moisture sufficient to water them, and make them hopeful and useful, was derived to them from the fountains, which were in number 12. They were rather a few moist places than springs. Well, this is not the Elim that is taught in Sunday school, one that is made out to be a beautiful place with lots of water. But the Bible did not say it had an abundance of water, nor was it a picturesque place, but had ill-grown and creeping palm trees, and the wells were rather a few moist places than springs. But this is exactly what was found here on the southern route through the eastern desert. Bedouins who frequent this site call it Wadi al-Rashrash, Valley of Sprinkling. As to the number of wells, the Bedouins said there were 12 plus 1 minus 1, which they also called wet sand. The number of these wells can change, depending on the rain or how dry it is in summer. The Bedouins also said there were only 3 places that had open water in them, as one would expect to find at a well, but the rest were, as Josephus said, moist places. The above satellite view is less than half of Elim, but one can count 6 groups of palm trees where the water comes up through the ground. Sir Wilkinson said, "I never saw or heard of any palms but near water. Manners and Customs of the Ancient Egyptians, Chapter 2, 105. Elim is located in the Giza Governorate of Egypt, about 5 miles southeast of the city of Atfi. Traditions. In truth, traditions are not the most trustworthy sources, but they're expected if one has the right route for the Exodus. 3 Muslim sites in a row bear witness to Moses being in this area. In the city of Atfi, about 5 miles northwest of Elim, there is a mosque said to have the footprint of the biblical Moses in a niche of the mosque. The source for the footprint of Moses came from a respected Muslim geographer, Yaqut al-Hamaw. About 2.5 miles west of Elim in the city of Zule is Masjid Musa, or the Mosque of Moses. It was built in the year 1121 AD. The date, which is in the Islamic calendar, and the name are both written on the ruins of this building. The tradition says that Moses came here to be alone and pray. There are very few, if any, mosques in Egypt explicitly named the Mosque of Moses, besides the one in the city Zul. The next encampment of Israel will be by the city of Burnibal, and this location has a canal named after Moses, the Tirat al-Masjid Musa Kibliya, in English, the Southern Moses Mosque Canal. Here is a cluster of 3 sites in a row, with traditions of Moses being in the area of this Exodus road, and even right after Israel comes out of the desert valley. And to the east and middle of these 3 sites is Elim with its 12 wells, which again is on the route we have been following, and in the right order as found in the Bible, following the only viable route for such a large multitude to have gone to the eastern desert, and with it, fitting the description of Elim given by Josephus. I say, it's a match. Why would the Israelites go back to the Red Sea when they had just crossed it a few days before? On the last map, it is plainly seen that Israel had no choice but to turn toward the river, as the valley she was following forced this change of direction. The Nile would still have been flooded at this time, with the Nile Valley draining back into the Nile, and the Bible has Israel go to the Yam Suf just after Elim with its 12 wells. Israel no doubt filled their animal skins with water, for they will be going out to the middle of the desert again on a known route. Wilderness of Sin Station number 8. And they removed from the Red Sea and encamped in the wilderness of Sin. Numbers 33:11. The meaning of the name, Gesenius's lexicon, gave clay. This is where we find the wilderness of Sin. There is only one encampment mentioned in this journey, and it was a distance of about 70 miles from the last encampment of Burnibal. How did they do this? The children of Israel left Egypt on the 15th day of the first month, Numbers 33:3. But here in the wilderness of Sin, it was now the 15th day of the second month, Exodus 16:1. A full month had passed since they left Egypt, and only 9 days were mentioned on their route. From the information that was given, it was 3 days from leaving Egypt till Israel encamped by the Red Sea, which they crossed. We read of 3 more days till Mara, with Elim and the Yam Suf both being a day's march. Then we are told Israel encamped in the wilderness of Sin. Israel was obviously spending more than 1 day at some encampments and was stopping at locations that are not named, as was also brought out before. It was at the wilderness of Sin that Israel received the quail, and it was also in the wilderness of Sin that God gave manna. It was like a seed white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. On the 7th day there was no manna. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. Exodus 16:26-27. It has been suggested that perhaps Israel's animals may have eaten the manna. For 40 years they were in the desert, and for 40 years they had bread. God has more power than we have faith. Now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think. Ephesians 3:20. Again, the meaning of the wilderness of Sin, by Gesenius Lexicon, was clay. There was clay found on this route in the eastern desert. In 1777, a man named Oyles Irwin made a trip in a Bedouin's caravan through the center of the eastern desert. In his diary, he noted, "The soil in many places is mixed with clay." A series of adventures, 1780, 312. This clay was found just to the north of the encampment at Dofka, see map, and it was the only time he mentioned clay during his trip through the eastern desert. How long they stayed in the wilderness of Sin will become important. Manna was provided for the first time in the wilderness of Sin, but the full week described there, along with the Sabbath, does not mean it all happened in the wilderness of Sin. In this same chapter, it also said they ate manna for 40 years, verse 35, but obviously that did not take place there. We are also told Aaron put, verses 33-34, a pot of manna before the testimony, but this happened at Mount Sinai. All these things are recorded in chapter 16 of Exodus to deal with them at one time rather than breaking them up and giving only parts of the information at each encampment. Dofka, station number 9, and they took their journey out of the wilderness of Sin and encamped in Dofka, Numbers 33:12. Meaning of the name, Strong's H1850. Dofka equals knocking. Continuing south on the traces of an old route, one comes to Dakdak, also spelled Dakdak, on the 1822 and 1843 maps. For Dakdak, the Arabic-English vocabulary of the colloquial Arabic of Egypt, 1895, has for its first definition, Dakdak, to knock repeatedly. This place name received the most comments from the 2 Egyptians who translated. They found it hard to believe that anyone would give the name Dakdak to a place out in the desert, and both asked, "Where did you get this map?" But it has been found on other maps of 1820, 2 1822 maps, 1825, 1832, 1843, 1851, and this 1844 map, all from the David Rumsey collection. It is also on the 1798 map of Napoleon Bonaparte. The oddity of this place name only helps to confirm that Israel was on this route in the eastern desert, following the line on the above map called Traces of an Old Route. There is no need for us to zigzag our way through the desert trying to pick up place names. And again, this encampment is in the right order. Alush, station number 10, and they departed from Dofka and encamped in Alush, Numbers 33:13. Meaning of name, Strong's H442. Alush equals I will need bread. If Israel continued on the traces of an old route, she would come to the city of Siut, also spelled Siut, Asuit, Asyut. Asyut is the largest city in Upper Egypt, located on the west side of the Nile. The Nile would have been back to its normal level after the early flood. Siut was the capital of its nome and strategically located, having 2 caravan routes coming in from the Libyan desert and 2 from the Arabian desert, one of which the children of Israel were on. For Alush, the Talmud, 3rd century AD, has a crowd of men. Making bread in a crowd of men would point to a city, not the desert. and this is what you would expect from sailors on the river and caravan routes, which would have been made up almost entirely of men. English author and Egyptologist Amelia Edwards made an interesting comment about this city. Now, our crew were to be allowed 24 hours for making and baking bread at Siut, Esneh, and Aswan. For here, as at Esneh and Aswan, there are large flour stores and public bakehouses for the use of sailors on the river, who make and bake their bread in large lots. Amelia Edwards. 1,000 miles up the Nile, Siut was one of 3 places in Egypt known for offering public bakehouses, and in particular for making and baking bread. So here is Alush, a place to knead bread. And as the Israelites already had manna, they were not headed here for this, so it follows that someone else is making the bread. Israel was here because she would need a good supply of water from the Nile to get to the other side of the desert. Israel was not always taking the direct route, because the Bible told us they were avoiding war, Exodus 13:17. And there was an enemy in this desert named the Amalekites, but staying on the old route would have helped them avoid the enemy's land. Moses knew this territory as he had lived here for several years after fleeing from Egypt. And they removed from Alush and encamped at Rephidim, where was no water for the people to drink, Numbers 33:14. Circled on our map is the site of Geb, Hem El Abd. This name, according to Sir Wilkinson, was Thamilt El Abd, Fount of the Slave, which may be a tradition of Moses striking the rock to get water. Moses and the children of Israel were no longer slaves, but would have been thought of that way by the people of the eastern desert. At this encampment, Moses' family meets him, brought to him by Jethro, the priest of Midian. More will be said about Midian when, at the end, we talk of Mount Sinai. Amalek, Amalekites, attacks Israel, who smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee. Some question whether the Amalekites were in the eastern desert of Egypt. 1 Samuel 15:7 says, "And Saul smote the Amalekites from Havilah until thou comest to Shur, that is over against Egypt." Havilah was a son of Cush, Genesis 10:7, Cush is Ethiopia. And as given earlier, Shur was the wall next to the delta and the Nile Valley. While at Rephidim, a full-scale battle takes place, with Joshua and the army of Israel winning the day, Exodus 17:8-18. There is a large valley of 8 by 20 miles, just to the west of Mount Garib, which the author proposes as Mount Sinai, where 2 armies could have battled. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Exodus 17:11-12.
Forward, men of Israel! Push them back to the cliffs! The Lord is with us!
Meaning of the name Rephidim. Strong's H, 7508. Rephidim equals rests, stays, or resting places. Jacenius gave props, or supports. I believe the name Rephidim came from what happened there. For the same encampment, Moses also named it after what happened there. And he called the name of the place Massa and Meribah because of the chiding of the children of Israel. Exodus 17:7. And the battle Israel won was because of the support Aaron and Hur did for Moses. They took a stone and put it under him and stayed up his hands, similar to the encampment Kibroth Hattaavah, which was named after what happened there. Wilderness of Sinai Station, number 12. And they departed from Rephidim and pitched in the wilderness of Sinai, Numbers 33:15. Mount Sinai is not mentioned in Numbers 33, because Israel does not camp on the mountain, but by it. Gabel Garib will be Mount Sinai, and will be covered at the end of the documentary. When we cover Mount Sinai, we will cover the country of the troglodytes, Midian, and Arabia, as these are all earmarks of the right Mount Sinai. But for now, because Paul said that Mount Sinai was in Arabia, Galatians 4:25, and God's mountain was in the wilderness of Sinai, it would also have to be in the Arabian desert. The wilderness of Sinai was in Arabia. 1. Using any one of the online search engines will confirm that in the past and today, the eastern desert of Egypt was Arabia or the Arabian desert. 2. The Arabians lived in different locations, 2 Chronicles 26:7, including the Arabians that were near the Ethiopians, 2 Chronicles 21:16. Ethiopians are not east but south of Egypt. 3. Napoleon Bonaparte's scientific team, he sent out 1798, consisting of scientists, geographers, and artists, published a huge encyclopedia, Description de l'Égypte, in 1809 and 1829. And surprisingly, they came to the eastern desert of Egypt, right in front of Gebel Garib. Notice the title on top, the Arabian Desert. Compare this drawing of Gebel Garib with the same area 228 years later. The meaning of Sinai. Gesenius's lexicon gave for its first definition, clay. The difference between clay and clay would be the same as the difference between mud and muddy. Napoleon's scientific team that he sent throughout Egypt made a statement about the desert where Gebel Garib is. In the Description de l'Égypte, it describes the area as, like all the large valleys of the eastern desert, a broad hollow scattered with mounds of chalk resting on clay. It's the desert of clay. Time and distance. It took the Israelites 30 days, including days of rest, from the start of the Exodus till they arrived in the wilderness of Sin, Numbers 33:3. They arrived in the wilderness of Sin on the 15th day of the second month, Exodus 16:1. And in the third month came they into the wilderness of Sinai, Exodus 19:1. So, half a month after the wilderness of Sin, Israel arrives at Mount Sinai, a distance of approximately 130 miles. Even subtracting days for Sabbaths and fighting battles, it should not have been a problem for Israel to have arrived there. The multitude. Throughout this route, I have been talking about the multitude of the Israelites who made this journey. The Bible said their number was about 600,000 on foot that were men, beside children, Exodus 12:37. The men in this passage would be from 20 years old and up, and counting the women and children, we are talking about at least 2 million, probably more. We are told that such a multitude would have been more than the population of Egypt at that time. Yes, and Pharaoh agreed. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, who knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Exodus 1:7-9. Gebel Garib in the background, lying in the middle of an 80-mile-long by 16-mile-wide desert, the desert of Sinai. The gentle slope of this desert would have been good for their encampment. Taberah and Kibroth Hattaavah, station number 13. And they removed from the desert of Sinai and pitched at Kibroth Hattaavah, meaning of Kibroth Hattaavah, Strong's H, 6914, graves of lust. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. Meaning of Taberah, Strong's H, 8404, burning. Numbers 10:33 says, And they departed from the mount of the Lord 3 days' journey. At a rate of 15 miles a day, that would place Israel just north of Wadi Taneh, circled on the above map. No place name is given during the 3 days until the last encampment. It appears they were in the same desert, and so there was no need to give a different name at each stop, for it was also clay, Taneh, as the wilderness of Sinai. On the older maps, the following Arabic words are transcribed as Teen for clay and Taneh for clay, though I have seen both used for the same location, Tiny being the equivalent of Sinai. I believe these two place names Taberah and Kibroth Hattaavah are at the same encampment, though they may have been located at opposite ends of the encampment, which was quite long. Taberah is not found in Numbers 33, where the list of the other encampments is found. The account reads, "And they removed from the desert of Sinai and pitched at Kibroth Hattaavah," Numbers 33:16. In Numbers 11, 1-3, it only explains how Taberah received its name, but there is no record they came to or left from Taberah. There is a record they came to and left Kibroth Hattaavah, Numbers 33:16-17, because Taberah and Kibroth Hattaavah are at the same place. Taberah, burning, is what happened to them.
There is no food, and the journey is endless!
God's anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them. Kibroth Hattaavah, graves of lust, is what happened to their ashes. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lusted. Numbers 11:34. Taberah is found on the map a few miles north of Wadi Taneh, and just south of the catacombs of Wadi Girfeh, Kibroth Hattaavah. This encampment was close to the sea, and there are indications that Israel was near the sea when at Kibroth Hattaavah. When Moses was confronted with the need of flesh for Israel, he said, "Shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them, to suffice them?" Numbers 11:22. And a wind brought quails from the sea. Numbers 11:31. This was the second time quail had been provided Israel. The other was at the wilderness of Sin, but that was in the middle of the desert, and nothing was mentioned there about a sea. Please see G.M. Matheny's Quest series for more information. Numbers 11:31. And there went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp. The quail were round about the camp, but not a day's journey on every side, but a day's journey on this side, and on the other side. Targum Jonathan, 3rd century A.D., Numbers 11, explains, "The quails fly from the great sea, and settle wherever there was place in the camp, as a day's journey northward and southward. This fits with the location of the site there. At this encampment, from the sea to the steep mountains is about 6 miles, with the Israelites in the middle, so the only way they could have collected quail a day's journey would be on the north and south sides." Kibroth Hattaavah, Graves of Lust, Sir John Gardner. Wilkinson, a pioneer Egyptologist, who explored these caves in 1823. We met with nothing interesting along this flat shore till we arrived at the low hills of Wadi Girf, a small knoll containing 18 excavated chambers, besides, perhaps, many others, the entrances of which are no longer visible. We went into those where the doors were the least obstructed by the sand or decayed rock, and found them to be catacombs. They are well cut, and vary from about 80 to 24 feet by 5. Their height may be from 6 to 8 feet. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lusted. Numbers 11:34. The Bedouins named this place Wadi el Kawaja, which was interpreted as Valley of the Foreigner. During Israel's 40 years of wandering, the burials of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam are mentioned, and only one mass burial, that of Kibroth Hattaavah, and they were buried, as the account says, not left to have their ashes blown through the air. The ancient Egyptians, Arabs, and Jews did not cremate their dead. Greeks and Romans did, but there is no record of them having forts in this area, and even at sites where Greeks and Romans were known to have lived in the eastern desert, they still have not found cremated remains because of the scarcity of wood. And though the Jews did not cremate, one day God's anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them. Numbers 11:1. Israel was at this encampment for at least 30 days. Numbers 11:19-20. So they had the time to make these caves. Caves or catacombs. Wadi Girfeh was excavated between 2011 and 2013 by a French and Egyptian archaeological team. They called the site Wadi el Jarf and acknowledged that Sir Wilkinson had originally found the site and that he said they were catacombs. They, however, believed the man-made caves, they called them galleries, were used for boat storage from a harbor they found on the Gulf of Suez, 3 miles away. They also made an impressive find, that of a 4th dynasty papyrus, the oldest ever found in Egypt, from the 27th year of the reign of King Khufu, Cheops, who is believed to have built the Great Pyramid. Only a few artifacts of boats were found there, and no complete boat was found there. In the above picture, the author is standing by one of the doorways that connect to another cave, with no way in or out except by this passage. If this were for boat storage, then the boats would have been small indeed to enter through this narrow passage. Sir Wilkinson said, "It is evident that the bodies were burnt, and the ashes, after the usual ceremony of bathing and wrapping them in these cloths, were probably deposited in the vases, of which innumerable broken remains are seen in every direction." This picture was one of 3 locations at Wadi El Jarf, where the pottery was gathered by the archaeological team, plus those pieces still in the caves or on the ground. The archaeologists who excavated this site did not mention that ashes could still be seen on some of the pottery. The date. This site, including the papyrus, jars, and wood fragments, is said to date to around 2600 BC. The papyrus of the 27th year of King Khufu and this king's cartouche, found on some of the ceiling blocks and on some vessels, were what was used to date this site. And the mainstream chronology of the 4th dynasty would place King Khufu around 2600 BC. However, no carbon dating was given. With today's technologies like the accelerators of mass spectrometry, AMS, it is possible to date samples as small as a grain of rice, and it is easy to obtain carbon-14 dating for the wood fragments. Author, beside the huge blocks used to close the entrances to these man-made caves, reasonable questions, and, hopefully, there are logical answers. 1. Why were these man-made caves sealed with large quarried blocks that required several men and wooden skids to close the entrances? Hard to believe this was done for a few pieces of boats or temporary storage of jars. But on the other hand, if this site was used for burial, it would make sense. 2. Why did no one mention the ashes that were on many of the vases? I saw it, and Sir Wilkinson said it was there. It is evident that the bodies were burnt, and the ashes, after the usual ceremony of bathing and wrapping them in these cloths. Those who excavated this site don't deny the ashes were there, they just don't mention it. 3. Why is there no carbon-14 dating for any of the papyri, wood fragments, rope, and cloth? The author is not doubting the authenticity of the papyri, but why no C14 dates? Wadi El Jarf. C14 data is now at LAPP, a particle physics laboratory in France at the University of Grenoble-Alpes. Their focus is on ancient Egyptian chronology. They combine ancient inscriptions with C14 data to have a broader analysis of the date. But the C14 data for this site has been around since 2013, and still no release of the date. All this implies that the Wadi Jarf C14 data, when given by itself without combining or mixing it with something else, does not align with accepted conventional Egyptian chronology. Dating by TL, thermoluminescence. The author had the pottery dated by thermoluminescence, which gives the approximate date by heating a sample with a laser. Pottery cannot be dated by C14. The luminescence the pieces give off can then be measured to give the date of its last firing, when it was made. All 3 laboratories the pieces were sent to were told they were found in the eastern desert of Egypt. The 3 laboratories were England, Oxford Authentication Limited, Boston House, Grove Technology Park, Wantage, England, November 11th, 2010. Second, a laboratory in France, CIRAM, Centre d'innovation et de recherche pour l'analyse et le marquage, December 16th, 2010. And third, a laboratory in Belgium, Brussels Art Laboratory, Nuclear Section, Institut Supérieur Industriel de Bruxelles, January 19th, 2011. All 3 laboratories gave test results of more than 1,000 years after the time of King Khufu. The oldest date given by the 3 laboratories was the laboratory in France, l'analyse et le marquage. They gave 3,230 years old, or 1230 BC, with plus or minus 310 years, or about a 10% margin of error between 920 BC and 1530 BC. Another possibility. Regarding the pottery date at Wadi Jarf, the author received an email, April 15, 2013, from the British Museum, which said, "The site and available vessels may have been reused." Possible, but if the vessels, pottery, were reused, why did the dates from thermoluminescence work for the time of the Exodus, but not during King Khufu's time? At the site of the catacombs, there are 2 ancient kilns for making pottery, and Israel could have used them to make the pottery or added to existing pottery that was already there. But enough guessing. Israel would have been in this area after 3 days of travel from Gabel Garib, and it is confirmed even more when at the next encampment. The Bible said they were killed by God's fire, and their ashes were buried and placed in the graves, Kabir of Lust. If this was not from Israel, then from whom? No one else in that area did cremation. Yezeroth Station, number 14, and they departed from Kibroth Hattava and encamped at Hazeroth, Numbers 33:17. Meaning of Hazeroth, Strong's H2698, settlement. Hazeroth would be Der Bolos, or the Monastery of St. Paul. There are no monasteries in the Bible, and it was less than 10 miles from the Graves of Lust. The monastery is situated there because of its good supply of water, and that would have been the reason Israel went there. Author with Thomas, a monk at the monastery, Der Bolos. The most notable event at Hazeroth was that Miriam, Moses' sister, was stricken with leprosy. She became leprous, white as snow, and Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. Numbers 12:15. When a leper was healed, as Miriam was, before the person could be allowed back into the camp, they were to wash his clothes. Also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean. Leviticus 14:9. And tradition from the monastery, Der Bolos, says that Miriam, at the time of the Exodus, washed in a spring at this location. Monastery of St. Paul. The monk was asked about the tradition of Miriam washing there at the time of the Exodus, and if he believed it. He said, yes, she had washed in a spring here, and he added that it was known as the Pool of Miriam. The monastery's tradition of Miriam's pool is also given by 2 Arab historians. Arab historian Abu al-Makarim, circa 1171 AD. The reference is found in the work commonly known as History of the Churches and Monasteries of Egypt, from B.T.A. Yvette's translation, recognized as largely the work of Abu al-Makarim. Arab historian al-Makrizi, circa 1441 A.D. The reference to the Pool of Miriam occurs in Al-Kitat, Al-Mawa'iz wal-Itibar, Bidhikr al-Kitat wal-Athar. This tradition of the Exodus in the eastern desert and that Miriam washed there fits perfectly with the encampment of Hazeroth, which came right after Kibroth Hattava. This tradition falls on the path we are following and in the right order. It is noteworthy that only Miriam is mentioned in this tradition, but no one else, not even Moses, the one person who was required to wash because she had been healed from leprosy. Rithma Station number 15, and they departed from Hazeroth and pitched in Rithma, Numbers 33:18. Meaning of Rithma, Strong's H7575, heath. The meaning of heath, Rithma, is shrubs, broom, or genista flowers. Heath plants feature tiny bell-shaped flowers in white, pink, red, and various shades of purple. About 13 miles northeast of the monastery of St. Paul, Der Bolos on the map, is a point on the Gulf of Suez named Zafarana, which lies on the eastern end of Wadi Araba. Sir Wilkinson gave the meaning, Zafarana signifies saffron. Saffron is a small plant whose flower is the same as the broom, white, yellow, or purple. At Zafarana, we find the next encampment of Rithma in the right order, with the right flower on the right path, and just a day's travel from the monastery of St. Paul, Hazeroth. Rimmon Parez Station number 16, and they departed from Rithma and pitched at Rimmon Perez, Numbers 33:19. Meaning of Rimmon Perez, Strong's H, 7428, pomegranate of the breach. The rarer the place name, the better the confirmation that it is the right site, and this name, pomegranate of the breach, is as rare as it gets. The next site is about 25 miles west of Zafarana. It would have required 2 days to arrive there. Israel couldn't have gone due north from Zafarana because the Jebel Kalala mountain range rises sharply and goes right up to the Gulf of Suez. Israel, of necessity, would have gone in a westerly direction. She would have most likely encamped at the location of the monastery of Antony, labeled on the map as Der Antonios, which had a good water supply. Continuing west, there is a location on the map called Wadi Annaba, which, according to Sir Wilkinson, was 12 miles from the monastery of Antony. What is an Annaba? Annaba derives from the Arabic word unnab, annab, meaning jujube. It grows in Egypt and countries thereabout and is a dark red fruit from a small thorn tree, really a bush, but it can reach a height of 15 to 20 feet. The word Rimmon, from Rimmon Perez, Numbers 33:19, can be translated as pomegranate as given by Strong's, and the Hebrew and Arabic languages both spell pomegranate with the same root RMN. Remember, they are consonantal languages, with the vowels, which were added later, being conjecture. Amazingly, in Hebrew literature, the jujube fruit has the same consonantal letters as the pomegranate and is named Rimmon, or RMN. The other half of the place names is Perez, and Strong's H7428 gives breach, which can be used for a crack in a wall or a gorge in a mountain, as used in the following verses: Nehemiah 6:1, Isaiah 30:13, Ezekiel 13:5. Thanks to Sir Wilkinson for a comment he made about the ravines of Jebel Annaba, a comment that he made about no other place on his trip through the eastern desert. At Jebel Annaba, we stopped for water. There are 2 very good springs, 3 or 4 miles from the plain, near each of which is one old deserted house, probably built by the monks of the neighboring convent. The ravines are very fine and bold, and judging from their depth, much water must fall there in the rainy season. Jebel Annaba was in the same location as W Annaba, which was Wadi Annaba, and it not only had very good springs for Israel to drink from, but also deep ravines, said to be very fine and bold. We could call it Annaba RMN of the ravine, which was Rimmon Perez for pomegranate RMN of the breach. Please take a moment and view the 12 place names found on this route, from crossing the Red Sea unto Rimmon Perez, Mara, Elim, Red Sea, Wilderness of Sin, Dofka, Alush, Rephidim, Wilderness of Sinai, Kibroth Hadava, Hazeroth, Rithma, and Rimmon Perez. In 2011, the author published a book on the location of Mount Sinai, and then 2 years later, a man named Musa contacted him, saying he had found writing on a rock there, and the person who had it inscribed was a pharaoh of Egypt. What's he doing out there? And when we returned to Egypt, he commissioned a stele, a hieroglyphic stone slab, which, besides recording other events in his life, tells of going to the wilderness of Sinai and finding the same 2 things Israel left there. When Israel left Egypt, they brought 2 things with them, besides their families and flocks. They brought 2 things with them that were Egyptian, and the Bible records that they brought them out to the desert. From the Bible, you can see they left these 2 things at Mount Sinai. Would you like to drive out to God's mountain? Well, if you don't have a 4-wheel drive, hop in. Beautiful mountain. What is Mount Sinai doing on the west side of the Gulf of Suez? The traditional Mount Sinai is across from it, Gebel Garib. The name Gebel means mountain, and Garib means strange, as in foreign, as someone might call a stranger from another country a foreigner. This is Bedouin territory. No Egyptians live out here. And for more than one reason, having a Bedouin guide is smart. It's something to see a writing that is 2,300 years old. What good will it do? Joshua 4:20-24. And those 12 stones, which they took out of Jordan, did Joshua pitch in Gilgal. And he spake unto the children of Israel, saying, When your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean these stones? Then ye shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you, until ye were passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us, until we were gone over, that all the people of the earth might know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that ye might fear the Lord your God forever. In May 2016, yet another Greek inscription was found, written in 3 lines, Arsinoe the goddess, the sibling loving. This was the title of Ptolemy II's second wife, whom he married sometime between 280 and 272 BC. These 2 inscriptions, that of Ptolemy II and his queen, are the only 2 inscriptions known at Mount Garib. Arsinoe, husband, Ptolemy II, established a royal cult for them both as the Theoi Adelphoi, sibling gods. And after her death, her cult expanded massively, equating her with deities like Aphrodite and Isis, across Egypt and the Aegean, and it has been suggested that these inscriptions at Gebel Gaharib were by someone in their cult who worshipped them. Only a few Bedouin lived there, and they did not worship her. To find Arsinoe II and Ptolemy II's names anywhere in the eastern desert is extremely rare. The mountain itself and the surrounding desert are a very harsh environment. It's not a tourist location. There are certainly those who believe that Ptolemy II elevated Arsinoe II to the divine status of goddess, as the inscription says, during her lifetime. The following is a list of scholars who believe Arsinoe was worshipped, or possibly worshipped during her lifetime. Please review at your own convenience. Here is a cameo of Ptolemy II and his queen Arsinoe II, whose names are inscribed at Gebel Garib. Now, before we go any further, we need to know if Mount Garib fits what we know of Mount Sinai. 1. Is it on the west side of a desert? 2. Could the multitude of Israel fit in front of it? 3. Is there a cave for Elijah? 4. Is it in Arabia? 5. Is it in the country of troglodytes? 6. Is it near Midian? 7. Is it the tallest mountain in the area? Number 1. Mount Sinai was on the west side of the desert. Moses led the flock to the backside of the desert, Exodus 3:1. In the Bible, the backside is west and the front is east. But those that encamp before the tabernacle toward the east, even before the tabernacle of the congregation eastward, Numbers 3:38. Same for the temple. Number 2. Israel's multitude could fit in front of God's mountain, and Moses said, The people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen, Numbers 11:21, plus the women, children, flocks, and herds, and also the mixed multitude that went with Israel, Exodus 12:37-38. Some doubt God's word, saying such a large number of people would have been more than the Egyptians. Yes. And he, Pharaoh, said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Exodus 1:9. Gebel Garib sits on the west side of a large desert, 16 miles wide by 80 miles long. So if a proposed Mount Sinai is not situated on the west side of a large desert, it is not the right Mount Sinai. Here is a view of the desert from Mount Garib looking south. Here is another view from the north looking back at Mount Garib. Notice how gentle the slight incline of the desert is. It would be easy for a multitude to pitch tents here. Number 3. Cave for the prophet Elijah. Elijah came unto Horeb, the mount of God, and he came thither unto a cave. 1 Kings 19:8-9. Some of this is a repeat from when we covered the encampments, so please review at your convenience. Number 4. Paul said Mount Sinai in Arabia. Galatians 4:25. Where was Arabia in Paul's day? The Bible has Arabians living in different locations, as the Arabians that were near the Ethiopians. 2 Chronicles 21:16 and 26:7. Herodotus, 440 BC, has Libya on the west of the Nile and Arabia on the east side of the Nile Valley, as do Pliny the Elder and Strabo. Number 5. The country of the troglodytes. A troglodyte is a cave dweller, but there was a nation, sometimes called a country of troglodytes, which was in the eastern desert of Egypt, and Josephus gave this as the location of Mount Sinai. But first, where was the nation of troglodytes? Sir Isaac Newton, 17th century mathematician and astronomer. Between Egypt and the Red Sea were nations of Arabians called troglodyte. Diodorus, Greek geographer, 1st century AD, going south from Suez, first of all, we shall take the right side, the west side, the coast of which is inhabited by tribes of the troglodytes as far inland as the desert. Wallace Max Müller lectured on Egyptology, troglodytes, wandering in the Arabian desert east of Egypt to the Gulf of Suez. Josephus, 1st century Jewish historian, when he, Moses, came to the city Midian, which lay upon the Red Sea, in the country of the troglodytes. What has been said? That the nation of the troglodytes was on the African side of the Red Sea, and that Josephus said this was where the city of Midian was. This is where Moses would stay till he took the flock of sheep to the backside of the desert and saw the burning bush on Mount Sinai. An 1844 map by George Long. Notice the Sinai Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, and the eastern desert of Egypt are all labeled Arabia. He also has troglodyte on the west side of the Gulf of Suez. Number 6. Mount Sinai was by the land of Midian. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. Josephus, 1st century Jewish historian. He has Midian on both sides of the Red Sea. The sons of Madio, Midian, took possession of troglodytes and the country of Arabia, the Happy. Antiquities 1:15. Pliny the Elder, Roman author, Natural History. A.D. 23-79, Troglodytes, the Old Midoan, some Midioan. Natural History 634. Number 7. Mount Sinai was the tallest mountain in the area. Philo, The Life of Moses, 270. For, having gone up into the highest and most sacred mountain in that district, very difficult of access and very hard to ascend, one would have to go 90 miles south to find a mountain higher. Also, Philo said it was very hard to ascend. Some places on Mount Garib look almost vertical. Josephus, describing Mount Sinai, said, "Now this is the highest of all the mountains thereabout." Who was Ptolemy II, the richest and most prolific builder of the Ptolemaic dynasty? Some say of all of them together. He built the lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria, largest in the ancient world, started by Ptolemy I and fully established by Ptolemy II. Ptolemy II favored Israel. He freed the Jewish slaves in Egypt, by some estimates 100,000 of the Jews. He didn't free any other slaves in Egypt. He had the Bible, Pentateuch, translated into the Greek language, gave great gifts of gold to the priest and temple in Jerusalem, Why did he do that? And where did Ptolemy II get his wealth? Gold coin of the wife of Ptolemy. The second, her name is also inscribed at Mount Gareb. Notice the double horn of plenty on the reverse side. The grand procession of Ptolemy, Philadelphus, was an immense, carefully staged Alexandrian festival 3.5 miles long under Ptolemy II that displayed God's images, exotic animals, vast treasures, and massed troops to project that he had been divinely favored with overwhelming wealth and splendor. It is arguably one of the greatest ever recorded in all of history. Staggering sum for his military, money in their treasuries to the amount of 740,000 Egyptian talents. Such was the state of preparedness for war, shown by the royal accounts as recorded and left by the king of Egypt, second in succession after Alexander, who was the most formidable of these rulers in his preparations, the most lavish in expenditure, and the most magnificent in projects. Appian, 2nd century AD, Roman History, Preface 2, and also Philo. This is 740,000 Egyptian talents. One Egyptian talent was 60 pounds. If silver, he is a multi-billionaire. If gold, he is a multi-trillionaire. King Solomon was the richest in the world, but during Ptolemy II's reign, he was the richest alive. He was on parallel to Solomon in his wealth. E.B. Bevan, The House of Ptolemy, 1927, Chapter 3. For wealth, his would outweigh the wealth of all the princes of the earth together. Theocritus, Alexandrian poet, 3rd century BC, Idol 17. Ptolemy II stands out for his wealth. Reasons given for his wealth: the cheap Egyptian labor of Egypt, the abundant crops of Egypt, the Egyptian gold mines, the port cities he built that brought in wealth, the canal he reopened that brought in revenue, his economic tax reforms. But all this could be said about the kings following him. And no one else in his dynasty, which lasted 275 years, had his wealth. The letter of Aristeas, 2nd century B.C., Josephus quoted it. He believed it was authentic. Antiquities 12, 11-118. Translated by R.H. Charles, section 283. Ptolemy II is asking questions of the Jewish scribes who translated the Bible, Pentateuch, for him. To what affairs ought kings to devote most time? The response: to reading and the study of the records of official journeys, which are written in reference to the various kingdoms, with a view to the reformation and preservation of the subjects. And it is by such activity that you, Ptolemy II, have attained to a glory which has never been approached by others, through the help of God. What was this glory of Ptolemy II, which has never been approached by others? His victories in war were fewer than others. His power and fame, though great, were small compared to Alexander the Great. It could only be in reference to the one thing he had more than anyone else: wealth. And how did he get this? By the study of the records of official journeys, which are written in reference to the various kingdoms. He studied the records about kingdoms that made journeys. Question: how many nations in the history of the world moved their people to another place? Especially with a view to the reformation and preservation of the subjects. This was the whole purpose of the Exodus. Besides, the person who told Ptolemy II, this was a Jew who would have had uppermost in his mind the exodus of his own people. So, Ptolemy II studied this, and it gave him a glory that others did not attain.
During the exodus of Israel, the Egyptians gave them their jewelry, and they buried it at the mountain of their god.
So, all the women of Israel had this jewelry?
No, everyone, men, women, and children.
The Pithom Stele. The Pithom Stele, found in 1882 in the East Nile Delta. Translation by Egyptologist Edouard Naville, covering the first 21 years of Ptolemy II's 40-year reign. We will only be looking at 3 lines in this stele, and it is somewhat technical, but after an explanation, it should reveal some secrets. The Pithom stele tells us when, how, and by whom Ptolemy II received his wealth. The translation by E. Navel, 1903, but in parts the more recent translations by M. Nilsson and K. Mueller. Line 3, therefore his father, Tum, honored him above millions. And when he averted the enemy from this land, he enriched his house with weights of silver in hundreds of thousands provided by Toth. Ptolemy II is he in this stele. Of silver is added by Navel. It could be gold. The weights are Egyptian talents, 60 pounds each, and there were hundreds of thousands of these talents. This is extreme wealth. And if it was gold instead of silver, he is a trillionaire. Line 3 is Ptolemy II's own account of when he got his wealth, when he averted the enemy. The enemy Ptolemy II averted was the Tesharu. Line 4. By his skill averts the Tesharu, Navel explains, averts the Tesharu, the nomads of the Arabian desert, the store city of Pithom, and the route of the Exodus, page 17. No one would expect the nomads of the desert to fight the Egyptian army. Ptolemy II just averts them. He chases the nomads away. Line 11. His Majesty went to Teshit at the entrance of the south. Teshit has the determinative for a desert or foreign country. Teshit and Tesheru. Notice both are spelled Tesh, with Teshit being the land or desert, determinative. Tesheru are nomads of the Arabian desert, Navil. Egyptologist Wallace Budge is in agreement. Tesh-T, the red land, that is the desert. Teshu, Tesheru, the red fiends. Line 11 is our place of interest, and the scholars are not in agreement here and have a sharp argument about whether Ptolemy II went to Persia. Line 11. His Majesty went to Teshit at the entrance of the south. He reached the land of Persia, Persia is debated, and found the gods of Egypt, all of them. His Majesty brought them to Egypt. They came with King Ptolemaeus to Chemtit, and they protected His Majesty going to Egypt. They were received by the inhabitants of Egypt, full of joy at the arrival of these gods. After these things, His Majesty was exalted because he brought back, line 12, the gods of Egypt. Twice he calls them gods of Egypt. Question: how did the Egyptian gods, idols, get out into the desert? And not only do the scholars argue whether it should be Persia or Palestine, but they are not sure where either Teshit or Chemtit are located. In the rest of this stele, the scholars are basically in agreement and respectful of one another, but not in line 11. Does it not seem strange that this one line has produced two question marks, Teshit and Chemtit, and one heated argument? Allow a sampling of their debate of whether it is Persia or Palestine. Dr. Joachim Friedrich Quack, a scholar of distinction and director of Heidelberg University's Institute of Egyptology, said, "Personally, I think the equation with Palestine is highly dubious, to say the least." Classical scholar W. W. Tarn, Fellow of the British Academy, said, regarding it being Persia, "This is out of the question. The idea that Ptolemy II circumnavigated Arabia is absurd." Edouard Naville said, "A journey performed by the king, in which he found the gods of Egypt. There is no battle fought there. He simply found their gods." Regarding line 11 of the Pithom Stele, David Lorton, renowned Egyptologist and translator, the supposed expedition of Ptolemy II to Persia, 163 JSTOR, said, "It seems improbable that the primary purpose of the expedition was the recovery of divine images, and the text seems to imply that their discovery occurred by chance." Amen. I couldn't agree more. Ptolemy II did not go to the land of nomads to find idols. These were only a side benefit from his trip. He was searching for something else. And again, who took the idols of Egypt? And who would have brought them to the wilderness? And who would have left them there? Israel brought Egyptian idols with them. "I am the Lord your God. But they rebelled against me, neither did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Wherefore I caused them to go forth out of the land of Egypt, and brought them into the wilderness." Ezekiel 20, verses 7 to 10. The Israelites brought Egyptian idols with them on the Exodus. Isn't that surprising? and other countries knew about this. Marcus Justin, 3rd century AD Roman historian. Moses, being the leader of the exiled Israelites, stole away the sacred things, idols of the Egyptians. 36:2. A Hebrew text called Exodus Rabbah says Moses made Israel discard their idols in the wilderness. Beshalch 24. But where were the idols discarded? Perst are the transliterated hieroglyphs that the scholars use for Palestine or Persia. As was brought out before, ancient Egyptian was, for the most part, a consonantal language, and archaeologists will add the vowels as they believe it should be pronounced. For example, the Egyptian god, Atum, can be found with spellings of Tem, Temu, Tum, and Atem, but without the vowels, it is just Tam. There was no L in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and their R was weak, so it was not unusual to find it translated as L. That is why some scholars believed Prest was Palestine, substituting the L for the R and adding the vowels. Still, they had no N for Palestine, but just added it. Some translations of the Pathum Stele even add Asia to line 11, but it is not in the hieroglyphs. I wonder if I started adding consonants and even a name of the area I think it should be, if I could get away with that. The double TT from Prest can be dropped to make PRs, and this could work for Persia. But Ptolemy II fought no known battles in Persia, which would have been necessary to have taken back their idols. Scholars don't agree among themselves where Prest is and argue whether it is Palestine or Persia, but both sides are wrong. Ptolemy II and Queen Arsinoe went south. Line 11 of the Pithom Stele. His Majesty went to Teshit at the entrance of the south. Teshit was the desert land of the nomads, where Ptolemy II's inscription is found, which is in the south, but Palestine is northeast, and Persia is east. In line 11, after Ptolemy II finds his gods, he leaves and goes to Khemtit. Where is Khemtit? Khemtit is also found in lines 22 to 23, where it says, he navigated towards the coast of the Red Sea. He arrived at Khemtit. The scholars know where this is, and it is located by the Horn of Africa, which of course is also south. Was there a slight variant in the hieroglyphs of the Khemtit in line 11 and lines 22 to 23? Yes, there was, but it was so slight that it was not possible to spell it any differently in English. And the scholars readily accept the spelling variants for place names, as between Kez/Gezem, or Chisa/Kes, or Medjay-Mday, Mazoy, and Mejay. If one still wants to go northeast to Palestine or east to Persia, then please explain. 1. In front of Gabel Geharib, inscribed in granite, are the names of Ptolemy II and his queen. In line 11 of the Pithom Stele, Ptolemy II said they had arrived at Teshit, and Egyptologist Wallace Budge said it was the land of the Tesheru, and Egyptologist Edouard Naville said the Tesheru were the nomads of the Arabian desert, which is also in the south. 2. After Ptolemy II arrives at Prest, which will be shown to be the name for Sinai, he goes farther south to Khemtit, which is nowhere near Palestine or Persia. 3. Why does the Pithom Stele say Prest was in the south? If the direction was not important, it would not have been given. Names from the 1844 map by John Arrowsmith. Mount Garib is about 45 miles south of Wadi Tineh, which is at the end of the desert, just before the foothills. Israel's first named encampment after leaving Mount Sinai was Kibroth Hattaavah, which the Bible said was 3 days' journey, Numbers 10:33. About 15 miles north of Tineh was the ancient harbor of Khufu, possibly the entrance to the south. Tineh is Arabic for clay or clay. Nowhere else in the eastern desert does the name Tineh appear, but Tineh or Teen does appear in the north for the Greek city of Pelusium, clay or mud. Strong's gave for Sinai number 5514, thorny. Gesenius's lexicon gave for Sinai, Clea, miry. Remember, there was no L in Egyptian hieroglyphics, and the R was weak and could be dropped or transcribed L. That is why scholars who believed Prest was Palestine substituted the R for the L and added the vowels, even though they still had no N for Palestine. For the scholars who thought it was Persia, they dropped the double TT from Persis because it was also weak, and came up with Piors and added the vowels for Persia. But Ptolemy II fought no war there as required if he took back Egypt's idol. The Greek name for clay is Pylos. Python Stele has Ptolemy II in the desert of Prest, doing what the scholars did, dropping the double TT and making the R, L. We have poles and add the vowels. It's Pylos equals clay. Ptolemy II went to the desert of Pylos, Sinai. When at the encampment of the wilderness of Sinai, the connection between Sinai and clay, or clay, was brought out. But not only was the desert named Sinai, but also the mountain, and Mount Sinai would have received its name from the desert of Sinai. Napoleon's team of scientists and artists whom he sent throughout Egypt came to Gebel Garib and made the drawing on the right. They describe the eastern desert where Gebel Garib is in their Description de l'Égypte, 1809 and 1829. Like all the large valleys of the eastern desert, a broad hollow scattered with mounds of chalk resting on clay.
Are the ships ready and soldiers?
Yes, but I have been told we will need someone who knows the language there.
The author does not believe in any of their mythological gods, but the ancient Egyptians and Greeks did, and it was tempting for both the Romans and Greeks to add Moses to their pantheon because of the plagues he called down on Egypt and his miracles, especially the dividing of the sea. It was an odd time in the history of Egypt. For almost 300 years, Egypt was not ruled by Egyptians but by Greeks, and the Greeks favored Moses and spoke well of him. Please view the following at your convenience: Alexander Polyhistor, Eupolemus, Diodorus Siculus, and Strabo. It's important to keep in mind that though the Greeks favored Moses, the Egyptians hated him, for he freed their slaves and drowned their entire army. And because of this, the pharaohs of the Ptolemaic Greek dynasty could not have spoken well of Moses in front of the Egyptians. Moses and Hermes. The syncretism, or mixing of other mythological gods, made for a confusing religion. As the Egyptian god Amun was called by the Greeks Zeus and by the Romans Jupiter, they assimilated these gods into their pantheon. While not all Greeks accepted Moses as Hermes, the identification was well documented in Hellenistic Jewish literature, especially in Alexandria, which was the hub of cultural exchange with a large Jewish population, and was also the home of Ptolemy II. Artapanus, a Jewish historian, 3rd to 2nd century BC, lived among the Greeks in Alexandria, and likely during the time of Ptolemy II. He said that before Moses led the Exodus, Moses was loved by the masses, and was deemed worthy of godlike honor by the priests and called Hermes. This is only given as a sampling, for much has been written about this, though in reality the real Moses was not anything like the made-up Hermes. And the Greeks also associated Hermes with the Egyptian god Thoth. In Egypt, the main cult center for Thoth was named by the Greeks Hermopolis, city of Hermes. Therefore, if a Greek pharaoh wanted to speak or write something favorable about Moses, he would have used Hermes' name. This was not a problem for the Egyptians, who knew the Greeks associated Hermes with their Egyptian deity Thoth. Because Moses and Israel were not liked by the Egyptians, Ptolemy II could not have said Moses gave him his wealth, but he did say, "He who enriched his abode with hundreds of thousands of weights of silver, following the instructions of Thoth." Line 3. Again, Thoth was the counterpart of Hermes, whom the Greeks associated with Moses. Ptolemy II got his glory, wealth, by the study of the records of official journeys, of kingdoms, letter of Aristeas, following the instructions of Thoth, Python Stele. Even before the Septuagint, portions of the Exodus and what Moses had done were already in the Greek language. Aristobulus, Alexandrian philosopher. The borrowing of other religions' gods and swapping their names was something even some Jews had gotten caught up in. In the letter of Aristeas, the Jews told King Ptolemy II, they, the Hebrews, worship the same God. Aristeas 15-16. But of course the God of the Bible is not the same as the make-believe gods of man. In Greek mythology, Zeus had parents and was born. They said he was the king of the gods, but had limited power. He was not omnipotent or omniscient. The God of the Bible is eternal. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Psalm 90, verse 2. God is the Creator, all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere present. What we know by Ptolemy II's own account. 1. He received his wealth all at once from Thoth, whose Greek counterpart was Hermes, but they were both myths. That leaves Moses, who was associated with Hermes. And the Bible tells us Israel brought large amounts of both ornaments and idols during the Exodus. 2. The Jews were told to discard their jewelry at Mount Sinai, and they couldn't have kept their idols after the second commandment forbade it. 3. Ptolemy II said he went to the desert of the Tashit and the land of the Tesharu, who the scholars say were nomads, and even today the Bedouin with small flocks of sheep and goats are the only ones who live there. 4. Ptolemy II said it was in the south, and that's where his name was found. And there is no other place on the west or east coast of the Gulf of Suez where Ptolemy II's name has been found. 5. He said it was the land of Prestit, which works perfectly for Sinai, but is a problem for either Palestine or Persia. 6. He said he found Egyptian gods there, and the idols Israel brought to the desert were Egyptian, and Israel left them at Mount Sinai. 7. He said he was made very, very rich when he chased, averted the Tesharu, which follows. He was in their land, Teshit, which is where Ptolemy II said he went to on his trip. And besides Israel discarding their idols, they also left the largest treasure in the world, ornaments from 2.5 million people. 8. And we're told, Tesheru, the nomads of the Arabian desert. The Bible said Mount Sinai was in Arabia, and Gebel Garib is in the Arabian desert. Before leaving Egypt, Israel received ornaments from the Egyptians. Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold, the children also. The men alone were 600,000 plus women and children. But while Moses was on Mount Sinai, Israel made the golden calf, and God had it destroyed. That's when they were made to discard what they had received from the Egyptians. And the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by the Mount Horeb. Mount Sinai is also called Horeb. The tabernacle in Exodus 33, 1-11 is generally believed to be Moses' tabernacle, as Israel gives gold, 2 chapters later, in Exodus 35, 4-29, to build their main tabernacle that would house the ark. This means they still had wealth besides that, which they gave up at Moses' command. Israel not only received wealth from the Egyptians, but most likely from the Amalekites they defeated just before arriving at Mount Sinai. The wealth and ornaments from 2.5 million people would have built multiple dozens of the main tabernacle. Question: what happened to the ornaments they stripped off? Targum Jonathan, 3rd century AD, Exodus 33, when referring to these ornaments said, "And Moshe, Moses, took and hid them in his tabernacle of instruction." And this was at Mount Sinai. After this, we never hear about the ornaments again. Centuries later, a wise man started studying the journeys of kingdoms and learned Israel had left their ornaments at Mount Sinai. And in Ptolemy II's time, the location of Mount Sinai was still known.
You knew God did not want you to have those idols. You should never have made the golden calf.
The hiding and burying of idols and ornaments at Mount Sinai was not something isolated in the Bible. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household, and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments, and let us arise, and go up to Bethel. And I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. Genesis 35, 1-4. Getting close to God often requires letting go of what has held a person from God. It would not have been easy for them to give up their ornaments and idols, but they did. After this, we find Jacob and his family worshiping at an altar in Bethel, and the meaning of the name Bethel is house of God. During the Exodus, Israel brought 2 things from Egypt and left them at Mount Sinai. 1, Egyptian gods. 2, an immense treasure. Ptolemy II said he went to the desert of Sinai and found 2 things. 1, Egyptian gods. 2, an immense treasure.
Hi, I'm Gary Matheny, and this is my wife Nancy, and we're glad we're in the ministry and we get to be here in Romania. I love the ministry. It doesn't mean there's a life without problems, just like taking a train trip has its bumps along the way, but the Lord always got us to where we needed to go. And someone said to me, "You're going to give your youth to serve the Lord." We would have given our youth even if we'd have stayed home. Doesn't it make sense to serve the one who loves us, died for our sins, whose body rose again from the grave, that we should be a light for the one who created us? And why are we here in Romania? For the same reason we were in the United States serving the Lord, telling people that only Jesus Christ can get you to heaven. It's not Jesus plus something, it's Jesus Christ. All the good things we can do, joining our church, being religious, that's great, but that will not get your soul to heaven. We need to take our faith out of everything else and trust Jesus alone for heaven. And you call upon Him directly and say, "Lord, I take my faith and put it totally in your hands, and I trust you with my soul. So when I die, I will go to heaven. I love you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus, for dying in my place." Won't you do that? Won't you do that today?
I want to invite you to G.M. Matheny's main site, helpyourfaith.net, where everything is free and everything is Christian. Do you like adventure? A site for both young and old, 200 truths of the Bible in layman's terms, all in alphabetical order, uplifting Christian ebooks, Christian films, short stories, helpful podcasts, and more? Now please visit helpyourfaith.net and tell others what you found on this site that encourages you.